Shea is a professor of strategy and security at the University of Exeter. He was an international public servant and a member of the international staff at NATO for almost 40 years. Wow, that's some experience there, Jamie. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. About this implementation of a no-fly zone, the two sides, while both confronting Russia, have very different interpretations. The Ukrainians, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister, they're telling the West, if you don't implement a no-fly zone, the war is coming to you. The West is saying, if we do implement a no-fly zone, the war will come to us. Can it be both ways?
Well, no, it can't. And I understand, like all of us, this dire situation in which Ukraine currently finds itself, despite fighting very, very bravely, and therefore the overwhelming desire to sort of do everything that you possibly can. But if you're a NATO planner, you need to keep a cool head and look at this very rationally. And the fact of the matter is a no-fly zone would not work. Take last Sunday when Russia launched 24 cruise missiles from Russian territory at the Yavoriv base in western Ukraine. A no-fly zone could not prevent that kind of occurrence. Also, if NATO would implement a no-fly zone, it would have to demolish the Russian air defense system, which means attacking, for example, S-400 batteries, the ones that Turkey has purchased from Russia, deep inside Russia. So that obviously would be a provocative act and would lead to escalation. So I understand, President Zelenskyy wants every type of help he can get, but it's very important for NATO to give the kind of assistance that really will make a difference for the Ukrainians, and which will also not give Putin an excuse to see NATO as entering the war and thereby escalating it.
Yeah, the Russians said that there were weapons being stored at that military base as well. They had said 24 hours before that strike that any foreign weapons arriving in Ukrainian territory would be considered a legitimate target. The thing is, countries like the United States, they have pre-existing security agreements with Ukraine. So what's the problem with sending to an ally weapons when a country is being attacked? I mean, it also, in a very simple way, shows that Ukraine is still a normal country functioning in a normal way and abiding by its agreements that it had before the attacks.
I completely agree with the statement that lies behind your question. And the fact of the matter is that NATO countries are giving considerable assistance. President Biden released $200 million worth of equipment from American stocks in recent days. The United States has provided over $1 billion of assistance over the last year. Many countries, Germany, the Netherlands, that did have restrictions on giving lethal equipment to Ukraine have fortunately lifted those restrictions. A large number of allied countries are supplying Ukraine with weapons that make sense. For example, the UK just a couple of days ago with more effective shoulder-fired anti-aircraft systems. But you've got to adapt the kind of assistance you give to Ukraine to where the Ukrainian forces are. In cities, urban warfare, a lot of volunteers with little military training. Frankly, they're not going to be able to handle sophisticated Patriot air defense systems, which require years of training. And so what the West is giving, these light, easily transportable, difficult for the Russians to spot, anti-aircraft systems, anti-tank systems, Javelin Stingers, these make sense in terms of where the dynamics of the conflict stand today. But a lot of assistance is going in, which is the reason why the Russians are making such a fuss about it.
Jamie, how much more complicated would it make the situation if both Russia and Ukraine proceed with their desire? From the Russian point of view, they say they want volunteers, many of whom have been fighting for the regime in Syria, to come and fight on its side. The Ukrainians are saying, actually, you know what, if you've got military experience and you want to volunteer, we will in fact pay you. But does it change the rules of engagement when those sort of protagonists start to engage in fighting?
Well, certainly, as we've seen with the way in which Russia has used proxies like the Wagner Group in Africa and the Middle East, these Russian mercenaries have been implicated in all kinds of human rights abuses, exploitation of local resources, criminal activities, and the EU has imposed sanctions on the Wagner Group. Also, we see that the way in which Russia has fought in Syria is to let the proxies do the dirty work for it. while Russia sticks to the easier tasks of providing support from the air and artillery support. So I'm not surprised that, given the Russian way of war, they're trying to find proxies and mercenaries to help them out again. But it's going to be very interesting to see if the 16,000 so-called volunteers that Russian Defense Minister Shoigu pointed to the other day really do show up. On the other side, I think the way in which Ukraine is getting this support shows the incredible outburst of international sympathy and solidarity with Ukraine. But yes, you're absolutely right. Where there are volunteers, it's very important that they do have military experience, that they don't have criminal records, that they're going there for the right reasons, and that they fully comply with the professional order of battle of the Ukrainian armed forces. We don't want any freelancers in this kind of conflict. So I take your point there.
Jamie, really interesting to hear your analysis. Thank you so much indeed for speaking to us on the News Hour.
Thank you.